Things I wish I knew before starting to draw. This video is for beginner, maybe intermediate, I'm not sure. Basically, for those who want to start drawing traditionally, pen and paper. Number 1. Knowing what pencils to use. Have you ever been in an art store and look at the pencil section and think to yourself, they all work the same, right? Doesn't really matter which one I choose. Probably heard this in art class, but there's a reason why there's letters and numbers in the pencils. Graphite pencils are classified as either soft black, B, hard, H, hard black, HB, and firm, F. The degree of soft black, hard black, and firm are then further classified by numbers. The higher the number, the higher the intensity. All you really need to focus on is B and H. So anything with B feels soft to draw on, it's super pigmented, and you're gonna have to press hard to create a line. Now for H, it feels hard to draw on, the texture is rough and there's barely any pigmentation, so you do have to press hard just to make a line. There's also another thing you need to be fully aware. Depending on how hard or soft you press on your pencil, the easier or harder it would be to erase. Most artists know that when you're starting out your sketch, you need to press lightly on your base sketch. What I mean by this is the shape of the head, the body, anything that you need a reference on. Once you're finished with your base sketch, you start working on the details such as the facial features, the hair, the accessories, etc. While you do this, you usually tend to press harder. The reason why it's so important to draw softly first and then hard is because if you start drawing hard right away, the mistakes you're gonna make are gonna be harder to erase, and it's gonna leave a mark on your paper. But if you draw softly, you'll be able to make as many mistakes as you want, still be able to erase them with no problem. There won't be a mark that you have to worry about. When it comes to sketching, your goal is to be as clean as possible. The cleaner the sketch, the easier it would be to do line art and other things in your artwork. For example, like painting. Now for my sketch. When I sketch traditionally, I use both B and H. What you gotta do is start with your rough sketch with H pencils. I usually use 2H, 3H, maybe 4H. They're pretty light, so you have to press a bit harder to create your lines since it has very little pigmentation. The reason why I use this pencil is that you can be super rough, but you're always able to erase it with no problem. So you never have to worry about leaving a mark or anything like that. Now, of course, if you go super hard that you're breaking the paper, obviously that's gonna leave a mark, so don't do that. Now, I mostly use H pencils to draw my rough pose or my rough expression. Once it's done, I use this, which is the most important tool when you're sketching, the kneaded eraser. This is basically a clay eraser that erases as fine as a regular eraser, but the use is completely different. Most artists use this eraser to erase small details or bigger shapes because you're able to manipulate the shape of the eraser into whatever you want. But here's the trick. The reason why I personally use it is to remove pigmentation out of my sketch. Kind of like how you lower the opacity on a layer. It's kind of the same thing. To lower the opacity of your sketch traditionally, you would have to roll your kneaded eraser and poke lightly your sketch with the eraser. Be careful doing this because if you go too hard or too rough, you might accidentally make your sketch disappear, and that's not what we want. We want to remove the pigmentation so you can clean up your sketch and see it easier. By the way, I only recommend Faber-Castell's kneaded eraser. Other ones I have used are horrendously awful. Like the first time you use it, it's so rough and really hard to manipulate, and it barely gets the job done. It also makes the whole paper dirty. Compared to Faber-Castell's kneaded eraser, it always stays soft, gets the job done, and it's super clean, no matter how dirty it looks. The only downsides of kneaded erasers is that you can never really clean them. They're always gonna look dirty, but they're not gonna smudge your drawing, so it's completely fine. This is just to make sure, but I go once again with my H pencil and just do the clean version of my sketch again. Once I'm done with that, I do again with the kneaded eraser and start using my B pencil. I personally use 2B, maybe 4B. It really depends on the sketch. Now here I would press a bit harder since I'm doing more details and a more polished sketch. This looks great. At this point, the sketch is ready to be paint on or start drawing the line art, depending if you're gonna paint it or use markers, we would use the kneaded eraser once again. In that case, the idea is to remove pencil lead off the sketch. Number 2, use colorful pen and pencils in your artworks. Instead of using black all the time, you could use color pencils or pens in your artwork to make it more colorful. I would recommend only using color pencils if you're painting on watercolors. There's actually 2 tricks into doing this. I actually learned this trick from this really cool artist called Tenya Moyon Tusun. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but what this artist does is use an orange pencil lead as their base sketch, and once they're done with that, they use both red and blue color pencils to basically do a clean sketch or a line art into what they just drew. And this trick is genius because doing this trick, it actually makes the artwork more comfy. It blends in perfectly with the watercolors. Now the second trick, I saw it on Fluffy Art. What they do is use the H pencil as their base sketch, and once they're done with that, they do different color pencils to do the line art with. So let's say the object is red. So what they do for the line art is that they use a darker red or they use purple as line art. Another example is the object is green and the line art would be blue or dark green or a mix of both. Of course, really depends on the artwork, but I really think this is a great way to make your artworks more colorful, and it really makes the artwork stand out. So of course, depending on the artwork, if the color obviously is really dark, then of course use black. By the way, I recommend you guys check out Tenya and Fluffy's art because their art is really amazing, so please follow them. I almost forgot to mention this, but when it comes to pens, like colorful ones, you usually do the line art after you do the coloring, especially if it's a gel pen. If you use it before, it will smudge, but if you have a smudge proof, obviously you can do your line art before you start coloring it. Again, it depends on the artwork, but basically you would only use black if it's a very dark color, and try to have your colored pens to be darker than the object of the drawing. So for example, I draw a heart. The line art of the heart needs to be a darker red than the heart itself. With applying this logic, you could do that with any object in your artwork. It just basically makes the artwork more vibrant and blends in better in your artwork. Compared with a black pen, it just doesn't look the same. As for what pens you could use, I would just say any pen would work. Like yeah, just go crazy. When I was younger, I used to use gel pens all the time in my artworks and it looks super pretty. Just keep in mind that if the pen smudges, do the line art after you've done the coloring. But if it doesn't smudge, just go ahead and do the line art right away. Number 3, why eraser matters. The main reason why eraser matters is because how are you gonna erase your mistakes if you're gonna have a bad quality eraser? So in this case, quality does matter in your eraser. If you're using a really bad quality eraser like a pink eraser, you're just gonna end up hating yourself and ruining the whole artwork that you just made. So for the love of everybody's sake, please buy a good eraser. I have plenty of recommendations of what you can use. Like for example, my biggest baby is Staedtler, Mars Plastic, and Mono erasers. They're really good. I also highly recommend buying an electric eraser. I never really thought there was gonna be any difference, but oh boy, there's a big difference and it's so nice. You do have to change it with batteries, which sucks. Hopefully they do change it to just cable because that would be great. Any electric eraser works, to be honest, but if you're unable to get an electric eraser, I do recommend getting those like pen looking erasers to erase any details that you have. Mono has a great section of erasers for those tiny little details, so I recommend getting those. For the best, get like a medium size and a very thin one. Number 4, liner looks the best when it has weight. Weight in this context means how thick or thin the liner is gonna be. And in this case, it looks the best when it has weight. Depending on your style, some people draw thin lines on the inside and thick lines on the outside. Some other artists just add more weight into the line when there's like edges or stuff like that. You can see it here. I highly recommend practicing your line art work, either by participating in Inktober or an ink challenge. Just try to constantly work on your line art, either by drawing all black and white or doing hatches or line or dots or whatever. Anything works. Number 5. What alcohol marker should you be using? I know everybody's gonna say, oh, Copic is the best markers ever. And in some cases they are, but not a lot of people can afford them. Not even I can afford them sometimes. I've been wanting that 72 marker set, but it's just too fucking overpriced. Instead of buying that big set, I recommend combining 2 different brands of markers. In this case, you would be combining Copic with AGGHH markers. AGGHH markers are just way more affordable for everybody and come with way bigger sets than Copic can ever do. So, the idea is to buy the biggest set that you need of AGGHH markers, and then buying a few Copic markers that are very pastel or very pale. To start coloring, you use the Copic as a base color, so let's say a very pale yellow, and then if I want to do a gradient or a shadow, I use my AGGHH markers to make it darker or into a different color. The reason why I do this is because Copic markers are easier to blend when they're pastel. And let's be honest, not everybody needs every Copic marker or have to spend that much money on that stupid set for a cheaper price and a bigger set. And you could also just carry that around anywhere because they give you a little bag. Please sponsor me, I love you. Number 6, have your own color swatches. What I'm talking about is that if you have a bag of markers, you should be color swatching every marker that you have on a piece of paper and name each single one, so it becomes easier once you start coloring. Of course, still have a sheet of paper to quickly test your marker before you start putting it into your drawing. You never know what's gonna happen. So I recommend doing this with not only your markers but your watercolors, your acrylics.
I'm talking about everything.
If you have a pen board, put all of your color swatches there so you can just look up and see which one do you need. Number 7, you can still save your artwork, just don't throw it away. If you make a mistake in your drawing, there's plenty of ways to fix them. Depending on how severe it is, you'll most likely be able to save it with a white pen or a white marker. These are usually for very small mistakes or maybe big ones, it depends. Now, if you're really fucked up, sticky note to the rescue. Sticky notes give you a chance to redraw what you did. It will still look a bit weird, but at least better than what it looked before. Number 8, start making outlines in your drawings. What outlines do is give more clarity into the drawing or give a highlight into the drawing. So outlines can be used for a lot of things. It can be used to make something clearer into the drawing, separating one thing from the other, or remark something important into the drawing. There's many ways into making outlines, it just depends on the context of the drawing. Now, how do you make outlines? What I personally do is buy Posca pens, or I buy the specific gel pens. Other artists also just use acrylic paint or any sort of paint to make these outlines, but you can use anything that you prefer. I prefer using the Posca pens and gel pens because it's on the way and you don't have to pull out your acrylic paint or anything. It's already there to be used. I think that's it for today. Those were the ones I could think of, but if you can think of any other things I wish I knew before I started to draw, feel free to comment them down below. I would love to hear them. I'll try to see if I can make a part 2 of this in the future, but that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching and subscribe!